Ophelia, the shattered flower of love and madness. The young woman lies on the water's surface, her body suspended in a fragile balance between life and death. Her eyes are half closed, her gaze turned skyward as if in silent ecstasy, while her slightly parted lips seem to whisper songs of love. Her silver dress, embroidered with floral motifs, billows in the water, slowly dragging her downward. Her hands, one still clutching a bouquet of flowers, the other open in a gesture of surrender, reveal the duality of her fate, clinging innocence and resignation to destiny. Around her, nature erupts in meticulous chaos. Every leaf, every petal is painted with near-scientific precision. The water, crystalline and deceptive, reflects the sky only in the lower left corner, where a cloud drifts softly, while the rest of the scene is enveloped by lush vegetation framing her body like a natural reliquary. As you admire the golden reflections in her auburn hair, you can almost hear the murmur of the brook and the weight of silence, as though time has paused to forever preserve that moment suspended between poetry and ruin. The artwork Ophelia, 1851 to 1852, by Sir John Everett Millais, housed at the Tate Britain in London, stands as a seminal creation of the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood and one of the most recognizable paintings of the 19th century. The painting depicts Ophelia, a character from Shakespeare's Hamlet, at the moment of her drowning, a scene described but never directly staged in the play. This choice to visualize an offstage moment is significant, as it grants Millais considerable artistic freedom while engaging with a widely known literary source. Millet's artistic interpretation, giving form to the unseen, has shaped the cultural memory of Ophelia's demise, demonstrating the power of visual art to concretize and even redefine literary moments. For many, his image has become the definitive portrayal of the character's death. Shakespeare's Ophelia. In the tragic universe of Shakespeare, Ophelia emerges as a figure of fragile beauty and poignant melancholy, a symbol of innocence overwhelmed by the tempests of power, madness, and vengeance. Her story, woven into the fabric of Hamlet, is a funeral dirge to corrupted purity, a portrait of how patriarchal expectations and manipulation can annihilate a sensitive soul. The daughter of Polonius, advisor to King Claudius, and sister to Laertes, Ophelia is, from her first appearance, a character defined by familial bonds and societal impositions. Her love for Hamlet, the Danish prince torn by hatred and doubt, becomes the focal point of a tragedy within a tragedy. Hamlet, shattered by his father's murder, the former king, and the betrayal of his mother Gertrude, who remarried the new king, pours all his disillusionment with women onto Ophelia, alternating tender words of love with cruel reproaches. She, obedient to her father and brother's demands to reject the prince, unwittingly becomes an instrument of courtly schemes. The tragic turning point arrives when Polonius, eavesdropping on an encounter between Ophelia and Hamlet at King Claudius's order, is killed by the prince in a fit of rage. This event marks the beginning of Ophelia's descent into madness. Deprived of love, her father, and her sanity, she wanders Elsinore singing fragments of folk songs, distributing symbolic flowers, rosemary for remembrance, daisies for betrayed innocence, violets for regret, in a scene both poetic and heart-wrenching. Her seemingly nonsensical songs reveal a profound truth. The society around her has destroyed her voice, reducing her to an echo of pain. Her death, shrouded in mystery, is one of the most iconic moments in Shakespearean theater. Ophelia falls into a brook, perhaps a suicide, perhaps an accident, as her clothes swell with water. Like a mermaid. Gertrude's description, full of pathos and ambiguity, paints her as a creature suspended between life and death, nature and the supernatural. The weeping willow beneath which she dies becomes a metaphor for her inner grief, while the flowers floating on the water are a final farewell from a soul too delicate for the world into which she was cast. An enduring vision of tragedy and beauty. The work acts as a nexus where literature, art, and lived human experience converge, creating layers of meaning and enduring fascination. The feminine nature of Ophelia's death by drowning, as described by Gertrude and later depicted in art, reinforces social associations of women with water, passivity, and nature. However, it also carries undertones of a return to a primordial, almost pre-civilized state, an escape from the corrupt artifice of the court. Drowning is often linked to the feminine in literature and art. Gertrude's description emphasizes Ophelia's fusion with natural elements, like a creature native and endued unto that element. Millet's painting visually underscores this immersion in nature. The court of Elsinore is portrayed as corrupt and deceptive. Consequently, Ophelia's death in the Weeping Brook can be interpreted not only as a tragic end, but as a symbolic liberation from the suffocating patriarchal corruption of the court, finding a perverse form of peace or dissolution in the embrace of wild, untamed nature. This contrasts starkly with the violent, artificial deaths, stabbings and poisonings of most male characters in the tragedy. Artistic technique and pre-Raphaelite principles, detail, color, and light. Millet's decision to paint Ophelia aligns with the objectives of the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, named for their aesthetic ideal rooted in pre-Raphaelite art, which sought to rebel against Royal Academy conventions and pursue moral seriousness and sincerity. The painting process unfolded in 2 stages. First, the landscape. Millet spent 5 months, up to 11 hours a day, 6 days a week, in 1851 on the banks of the Hogsmill River in Surrey near Tolworth. This dedication to direct observation and on-plan air painting for the background was radical for the time, and a core pre-Raphaelite principle. The artist endured harsh conditions to achieve botanical accuracy. Later, the figure of Ophelia, outlined with model Elizabeth Siddal, was painted in his Gower Street studio during winter. The landscape, though nominally Danish in the play's setting, becomes quintessentially English, reflecting the pre-Raphaelites' focus on national scenery. The use of vibrant, intense colors in the landscape, contrasted with Ophelia's pallor, was achieved through techniques such as painting on a wet white ground to enhance luminosity. The availability of new pigments like cobalt blue and chrome yellow contributed to this effect. The composition and lighting are deliberate. Ophelia is positioned with her dress splayed outward, creating a mermaid-like effect. The lighting contributes to the ethereal and melancholic atmosphere. The flattening of foreground and background challenges traditional perspective, a modernist element. The painting embodies the pre-Raphaelite style, a vulnerable female subject, intense colors, and detailed naturalism. This tension between meticulous realism and otherworldly beauty is key to its haunting power and enduring allure. Ophelia's figure is depicted in a state of serene suspension as she drowns. Her pose, arms open and gaze turned upward, evokes imagery of saints or martyrs, or the Oran's prayer posture, suggesting passivity or acceptance of fate. Thus, the painting's strength lies in this intrinsic contradiction. The truth of meticulously observed nature frames a moment of human tragedy that is both horrifyingly real, she is drowning, and surreally beautiful, she appears peaceful, almost transcendent. This duality renders the image deeply memorable and open to myriad interpretations. A garland of symbols, the botanical language of the painting. Millet meticulously selected flowers in alignment with Shakespeare's descriptions and the Victorian-era language of flowers, where each bloom carried symbolic meaning. Millet's use of this language was not merely decorative but a sophisticated narrative device, enabling him to communicate complex emotions and themes directly to a Victorian audience fluent in such symbolism. This enriched the painting's readability and emotional depth within its contemporary context. Thus, the floral symbolism acted as a visual subtext, reinforcing Shakespeare's narrative while adding layers of emotional resonance. It was a way to achieve poetic symbolism through meticulous attention to detail. The willow, bending melancholically above her, recalls Gertrude's words in Hamlet. There is a willow grows aslant a brook, embodying forsaken love, while nearby nettles, mentioned in the same passage, allude to the agonizing pain of her demise. Daisies, floating near her right hand or among the folds of her dress, evoke lost innocence, a theme echoed by both Gertrude and Ophelia herself. Roses, wild on the bank or pink near her cheek, symbolize youth and ephemeral beauty, as when Laertes calls her the rose of May, underscoring life's fragility. Violets woven into a chain around her neck recall premature mourning. I would give you some violets, but they withered all when my father died, signifying broken fidelity and untimely death. Red poppies, vivid and unsettling, introduce the theme of eternal sleep and death, while floating forget-me-nots pledge devotion beyond the grave. Pansies, scattered on her dress, echo Ophelia's thoughts of futility, and foreground buttercups, cited by Gertrude, rebuke with their symbolism of ingratitude and childishness. Ambiguous elements linger. Wild orchids, placed high on the right, entwine sexuality and death, reflecting unresolved tensions, while Pheasant's Eye, Adonis annua, with its fleeting petals, becomes an emblem of grief and unheard apologies. Finally, Meadowsweet, Filipendula, discreetly positioned on the left, may allude to the futility of Ophelia's sacrifice, amplifying the tragedy of a life cut short. Elizabeth Siddal, The Face of Ophelia. The complex allure of the work stems not only from its artistic merit or literary subject, but also from the poignant story of its model, Elizabeth Siddal. Elizabeth Eleanor Siddal was born in 1829 to a working-class family. She was discovered in 1849 by Walter Deverell while working in a hat-making workshop. Her striking appearance, tall, red-haired, graceful, with an air of melancholy, was considered the epitome of pre-Raphaelite feminine beauty, though unconventional by Victorian standards. She posed for Deverell, Holman Hunt, and most famously for Millais in Ophelia. Elizabeth entered Dante Gabriel Rossetti's life in 1849, captivating him with her ethereal looks and auburn hair, which inspired affectionate nicknames like Lizzie. She became Far, more than a model, his favored muse, pupil, and lover. She was depicted in thousands of sketches and paintings after Rossetti demanded exclusive artistic rights to her in 1852. Their relationship, however, was a tangle of passion and conflict. After a decade-long engagement, they married in 1860. She was 22 when she posed fully clothed in a bathtub filled with water in Millais' studio during winter. Millais used an antique embroidered dress. Oil lamps placed beneath the tub to warm the water eventually went out, and Millais, absorbed in his work, failed to notice. Elizabeth did not complain, but already frail in health, contracted severe pneumonia. Posing for Ophelia required lying submerged in cold water for prolonged periods. Her father threatened Millais with legal action. The artist covered her medical expenses. The painting, intended to depict a fictional tragedy, became an unwitting prophecy and catalyst in the real-life tragedy of its model. Elizabeth's later life was marred by chronic illness and a growing addiction to laudanum, culminating in her death from an overdose of the opiate in 1862 at age 32. Her death was recorded as accidental, but suicide is widely suspected, with reports of a farewell note destroyed by Rossetti. Grief-stricken, Rossetti buried his only manuscript of poems with her in Highgate Cemetery. Later, in 1869, he had her body exhumed to retrieve them. A macabre legend that her hair continued to grow, filling the coffin, further mythologized her. This artwork is inextricably tied to the pain of its creation and the subsequent trajectory of its model's life. This renders the viewing of the painting an even more complex and somber experience. Critical reception. At its debut exhibition at the Royal Academy in 1852, the work received mixed reviews. Some critics found it disturbing or perverse, while others praised its originality. Over time, admiration grew, and the painting was recognized as one of the most significant works of the mid-19th century for its beauty, naturalism, and influence. John Ruskin's advocacy for the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood played a pivotal role in this shift in perception. The initial negative critical reaction to Ophelia highlights a clash between pre-Raphaelite aesthetics and Victorian-era tastes for idealized, heroic, or overtly sentimental depictions of death, particularly of tragic heroines. The pre-Raphaelites' insistence on raw, sometimes uncomfortable reality challenged contemporary sensibilities. Victorian art often favored idealized or sentimental subjects, whereas Millais portrayed Ophelia in a detailed, naturalistic, and unidealized setting. Critics expressed unease at the stark, unromanticized depiction of the environment surrounding such a tragic and romantic figure. The Pre-Raphaelites sought to reject academic conventions and represent nature and emotion with sincerity. Thus, the early negative reviews reveal a cultural resistance to their revolutionary approach. Critics' expectations of pathos and beauty in the traditional sense were subverted by Millet's meticulous, almost forensic observation of a natural, albeit tragic, scene. Conclusions. An enduring allure. The painting's legacy lies in its powerful exploration of the human condition, forever intertwining Shakespeare's genius, Millet's vision, and the haunting presence of Elizabeth Siddal. It is a work that continues to provoke questions about the nature of art, the representation of tragedy, and the complex dialogue between fiction and lived reality. Ophelia survives in culture not as a character but as a myth, a romantic heroine, an icon of fragility and shattered beauty.